Hello, welcome to the Brain Scrub, a somewhat improvised approach to mental health. My name's Glenn Sollers. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I made a bit of an about face recently, changing the name of the podcast to My Parental Alienation Journey, thinking, you know what, I'm going to start talking about this because my son's now old enough to hear this if he happens to tune in. But then a friend of mine shared with me, Glenn, I like the old name. It was unique. So I went back to the Brain Scrub. And I figured it's probably a good thing because I'm realizing getting back into the parental alienation frame of mind, which happened recently when somebody called me for support, and I'm there to support them the best I can, but it really brought me down in many ways, which is okay because I'm learning a lot about myself from this and how much profound sadness I still have, like profound. There's some anger there, and that's what I want to talk about today is when I'm in conflict and there's an unresolved conflict, I feel anxious, I feel stressed, I feel unsafe, and my son just turned 22. And it's sad that I haven't been part of his life since he was 14 at all. Don't really know what he's doing other than what I find on Google when I do look for him once in a while. Don't really know where he's living. And there's no end to this grieving process because he's still around. Yeah, so I'm feeling very, very sad and not liking this feeling at all. I'm not. I'm trying to get myself out of it, and maybe I just need to accept it and be with it. And that's why I'm talking about it right now. I just was feeling this urge to do the podcast and just share my sadness. And I think for many of us, we don't necessarily share our sadness or share what's going on. Recently, I spoke to a client and they had a sibling that passed away, and it was very sad. And they are from Argentina originally. And she went to Argentina for seeing her sister, and sadly that's when her sister passed away, but at least she was by her bedside and was with her. And she let her colleagues know, well, some of them in Canada, that my sister passed away. And I guess in Argentina, when something like this happens, you go around, you tell other people you're open and you're vulnerable, you share your sadnesses, you share your successes, you share everything. It's just more of an open culture, I guess, from what I understand. And this could be a generalization. I don't know. This is just based on my experience, my lived experience. The consequence was she came back to Canada and people said, "How was your vacation?" Thinking she was on vacation in Argentina. And she was very sad by that. She said, "You know what, Glenn? It's interesting. In Canada, people don't talk about their emotions or share these stories. And I understand it in a way because it's really not up to me, I guess, to share what somebody else's experience has been. And that's maybe just the Canadian way. But that's okay. However, what she also said is in Argentina, people are willing to deal with their psychological issues, like the consequence of certain traumas and things that happen in life. They're willing to go see a counselor. They're willing to talk about it. We're here, I feel we still are somewhat sheltered in that. And although we're doing our best around mental health, I think for our society, we haven't made a lot of progression in this. It reminds me of Mr. Rogers in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and this is an old TV program, how he was really devoted and committed to helping kids and listening to kids and helping them process things and going through things. And this was back in the 70s, 1970s. And why is it that we in this country, in Canada, and I'm sure in many other countries, do we not talk about this? Why do we hold back? Why don't we ask for support? I'm not sure. Which leads me to my whole situation with my son and parental alienation. It's difficult sometimes to get support, because it's hard to comprehend what it is like to not have a child talk to you unless you're actually going through it. Even when I try to advocate to different people out there, I urge you to listen to this, to understand what I'm going through, to understand what my son might be going through. And I'm sensing resistance out there that people don't want to get involved for whatever reason. This lack, and again, I'm just perceiving here, a lack of willingness to grow, develop. And it's amazing how many people are going through this. But I guess if you're not going through it, why would you have interest in it? So it's funny when I advocate for this. It's sometimes I feel like I'm going upon deaf ears. And a recent situation is where I sent a card, a birthday card, to a friend of mine to give to my son, and I urged my friend and his son to listen to the podcast. I don't know if they did or not, but for me, it's important to spread the message and understand what one's dealing with. Because what I guess what I feel is that, and this is where it comes down to it, is I don't want people to think that I'm the problem. I want people to realize that there's a thing going on, and I'm sure people who know my ex have probably been told that Glenn is a dysfunctional father. He has issues, and it makes me sad to think that way, and yet I do. It makes me question myself sometimes. It makes me feel lost and deeply saddened by this whole thing, almost like a sense of hopelessness that I wish people would feel the need to step up and get involved. And I guess that's the thing where I'm getting to in this country is in Argentina and other countries, people would probably get involved and try to help out and try to repair situations or get support or see a therapist or whatever it might be to have some reunification with individuals. But yet there's so many families that are operating in a dysfunctional way. They're not communicating with each other. There's this unresolved conflict. And it's sad to see the ripple effect it has on so many other people. But yet people step back and kind of wash their hands of it. And that's what I've always struggled with, was this unwillingness, I guess, to work on things. So when it does happen to me, I feel a lot of anxiety when there's conflict in my community that's unresolved, or people are saying one thing about another person that may not be true. It upsets me. When there was a situation with one of my friends who I said something that upset him, and he couldn't talk about it, and I had to wait for 5 days to talk to him about it. During those 5 days, I felt so anxious because I just wanted to resolve the conflict, and I have this need to resolve. And I understand where it comes from. It comes from a history of my parents not resolving conflict. I've never seen conflict resolve, and I'm doing the best I can. And what I do is I become very persistent, which is unhealthy. I become very impatient in resolving conflict. I want to fix things. And if they're not fixed, I don't feel safe. That's ultimately it. And it's a strange state for me to be in. And I get it. I'm trying to figure out how to overcome it. And I think the first part is just awareness in everything. It's just, if one is struggling with a certain thing in their life, to rewind the hands of time and consider, well, when did this all start? Who taught me this? How did I survive? And I survived conflict by trying to make everybody happy. When Glenn was happy, Glenn felt safe. If there's conflict, Glenn does not feel safe. Like, I get really nervous when I don't have a strong relationship with somebody, or there's some friction between the two of us, or I'm feeling like I can't be authentic and share what's going on. Tremendous anxiety I feel in those situations. It's almost like, I would say, sometimes a borderline, and I don't know if I've ever had a panic attack on things, but it's almost that, where I just want to remove myself from the situation. I don't want to be around it at all, and very uncomfortable. And I believe it comes from a place of, again, a lack of feeling safe, a lack of feeling understood, a lack of feeling heard. So what I do is I make sure I'm heard, or I just avoid it. I get stressed out about it. So this whole situation with my son is one of those situations where the other side is not communicating with me, and he is so important in my life. Sometimes I just like to let go. I'd like to let go and imagine that he's, and sadly enough, passed away. So there's some closure there. And I hate to say that because I don't want that to happen. But there's no end. There's no grieving period of grieving the loss. It's just in a state of limbo. And that limbo is difficult to be with when I know that he's still there and he's rejecting me, which is clear in his podcast messages. And it feels terrible to be rejected by somebody. And that ties into, I think, a bit more about this as I'm talking. Wow, I'm learning a lot. Is I felt I was rejected by my father. And in fact, that was confirmed by my aunt. She sadly passed away. That my brother was my father's favorite. And I talked about this in another podcast before. And this feeling of rejection, this feeling of needing to fix things, proving myself, has all shown up and reared its ugly head in this whole parental alienation situation. So for any of you that are dealing with such a thing where maybe you're estranged from somebody, what are the gifts in that? What can you learn about yourself that needs to be fixed? For me, it's a lot about self-care. It's about not taking things personally. It's about letting dogs lie down if they need to lie down. And I'm just using the term dogs like I'm trying to use a metaphor. Remember that metaphor, sleeping dog? No, let sleeping dogs lie. That I don't need to fix things in order to be safe. I am safe as I am. And to be in that, to believe in that, I am okay. The world is dysfunctional right now in so many ways. And it's such a depressing state of mind. And I was in a workshop recently where somebody said, you know what, Glenn, why are stress levels just going up and up and up? And I think there's so much unresolved conflict and people not taking action on things that we're starting to see the impact. And this is part of why conflict resolution, in my opinion, is so important. We have to be able to assert ourselves and let people know this is the wrong thing to do, but also to take some sense of responsibility and do something about it. Climate change is a huge example. There's so many parts of the world that are suffering based on our actions and based on their actions as well. We're all in this. Weather's changing, heat stroke, all these things are going on. Conflict in the world, Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, Israel, Palestine, like all this conflict. And it seems to be getting worse. The world is burning around us, literally. And I don't see enough action. And I wish, this is my wish, that people would start seeing that we're very interdependent. One person's action can have an impact on another person. And to work through that, to understand, well, what am I doing right now? And thinking critically about it. And what is the impact right now? What is the future impact? How is it going to ripple effect into our society? And same thing with alienation. One parent decides the other parent's bad, or I need to be valued because I feel insecure. So I'm going to keep that child with me so they focus on me so I can feel like the good person. And who pays the price? Friends, family, the other parent, the child eventually. That child's children pay the price. It is such an immense effect. And if the judicial system, or if that other parent was forced to figure things out and identify possible root causes for this, like think critically about what's really going on, is it legitimate? If we could be more proactive as a society and as Canadians, as an example, in terms of organizational effectiveness, in terms of being able to speak up our authentic truth and see the wrongs and try to make it right, versus just letting go because we maybe are just trying to be nice. And I'm not trying to say it's a bad thing. It is what it is. But I think sometimes our niceties or our, I'm not going to get into it because it's none of my business. Maybe it's not, but eventually it might be your business. Like, I think about the relatives that I've talked to who know about this. The ones that could make an impact have clearly stated to me, I'm not going to get involved. Well, eventually, that child, my son, who may want to get back to me, might no longer have a relationship with them because they didn't speak up. But I don't think we always see those effects. And it's easy to say, you know what, let go, do this. But I think we all carry a burden of some sorts. And like this lady from Argentina that I know, if we can all work together, support each other, ask for help, be vulnerable in a healthy way, I believe conflict is reduced because we can start questioning our perceptions. We can start looking at our judgments. We can start reflecting on, what am I making it mean about me? What am I making it mean about you? Versus blaming other people for the cause of disagreement, and rather understanding, I wonder what's going on here. We would do a great thing for society. And in terms of social media and artificial intelligence and different technologies that are coming forth, we look for the answer. I've looked for the answer on parental alienation, and there's so much information out there that I think it's creating confusion. It might also be creating a inability to work through problems with another face to face, trying to understand versus trying to understand perceptions that are portrayed in social media versus dealing with the human being. We're all delicate creatures. We all have different backgrounds, values, beliefs, which is not represented in a portrayal on social media. People's stories are their stories, but to look beyond the stories about why is that story there? Like with parental alienation, why is it my son felt like I didn't love him? Tell me more about that. Let's work through that versus perceiving my dad doesn't love me. That's not the case. There were times where I felt it was overwhelming with my son, as every parent does. There's times where we feel, wow, our kids are just a bit too much the temper tantrum. But deep inside, we all have love to give. And we all want love from others. We want to belong. My ask is, think about those things in your life, those conflicts in your life. What can you do to make sure that we belong together and work and live and thrive in this life with a sense of interdependence, not independence? Thanks for listening.